Lally-ho everyone, this is my video about how I sculpted the FatCat Minion from Final Fantasy XIV. This video is a recording of my stream on Twitch, so I'm sorry if something is not 100% super in focus or in the middle of the screen. Usually when I sculpt, I start out by making a wire armature, but since the FatCat is basically just a blob with ears, I just used a ball of aluminium foil this time, which I wrapped in polymer clay. This will save material since clay is expensive, but it will also prevent the clay from getting cracks easily when it's baked. Once I have it roughly covered in clay, I'm blending all the parts where the clay overlap to achieve a smooth surface. I usually have a reference sheet printed out with the object in different perspectives to check the proportions. As you can see here, the blob is way too round and needs to be flattened and widened. Getting the initial proportions right always takes a while, and at that point I can never really imagine this sculpt will look anything like the reference later. This looks already way better now. Next I'm checking the side view and at the head of the FatCat blob. The front view shows that I need to make the cheeks a lot more defined, so I try to separate the head visually more from the body. It still needs some extra cheek volume, so I'm adding some extra little clay blobs for its cheeks. When checking my reference, I noticed that the back is a bit more triangular and it needs a bit more volume on its back, so it's time for even more clay. This looks way more like the actual shape now. Time to add the base of the nose. I make two little balls of clay and attach them to the cat's face. I'm blending the top out so the lower parts stay structured for the mouth. In between I always check my reference. The forehead still needs to be a bit steeper, so I added some more clay for more volume. Then I fine-tune the lines of the mouth a bit. Now I can mark where the eyes are. Eyes are usually in their little bone cave of the skull. I mean, not that we can see any skull of a fat cat, but they still need to be somewhat inset, so I'm using a larger pointy sphere thingy tool to achieve this. You can't believe how fat the cat's cheeks are. I again added some more volume to the cheeks. Then someone in my chat pointed out that they thought the cat was still not thick enough on the sides. That's what I call some backseat sculpting, but they were right though. For smoothing out the smaller inset parts, I use a Q-tip that is drenched with 69% alcohol, which works for polymer clay in a similar way as water to organic clay. To remove streaks of fingerprints, I use a soft brush with alcohol on the surface of the clay. Then I finish the actual holes for the eyes. I'm also forming little eyes of clay and inset them into the holes. After this, I'm adding the nose, also a tiny ball of clay. Next up are the ears that I kind of YOLO here. Before I smooth them out onto the head, I roughly place them to see their position and if it is right. To be honest, I almost forgot that the cat has a tail. It's a weird bunny tail, and to this day I wonder why the fat cat has a bunny tail. To make a better connection between the body and the tail, I put a small piece of wire to the body. I'm checking if the tail is big enough and if I have to shorten the wire, which I actually had to do. Since I will not be able to really blend in the tail, I'm putting clay glue on the body. I'm using Fimo Liquid for this, mostly because Fimo is the brand that you can get your hands on easiest here in Germany. Then I put the tail on and make sure it's in the right place and shape. The cat itself is now basically done, so I give it an extra treatment of brushing with alcohol. It's October, so it's spooky time. I usually give my sculpts some little accessories or scenery, and the fat cat will go with some pumpkins and a little black mage hat. The pumpkins get a fall core like the cat, and then I give them their basic shape. I'm marking these inset lines, creases, I don't even know what you would call them in my native language, with my tool. I press the clay to the sides and then I use my trusty silicone tool to smooth it out. When the basic pumpkin is finished, it gets a stem. I'm using the structure of the stem to blend it into the pumpkin. There is 2 little pumpkins and then they get connected just like the tail to the body with a piece of wire and some clay glue. Once the pumpkins are in place on top of each other, the upper one gets the little plug mage hat. That is not supposed to look super new and shiny, so I'm wearing it out on the edges a bit with a scalpel. My scalpel is, by the way, super blunt, so be careful if you're using a new one. I made an additional butternut pumpkin for some diversity in the scenery. It looks a bit more like a yellow eggplant in the end, but oh well. The FatCat and the pumpkins are ready for baking. I bake them, like stated in the clay's instructions, for 30 minutes at 130 degrees Celsius, since the clay is roughly 1.5 centimeters thick in some parts. Next up is painting. I'm usually starting out with the base that the sculpt is later going to sit on. It can be a flat base in this case, because I don't need any armature to be fixed in it. To get a magical October feel, I am having the cat sit on a starry night sky. Okay, no idea why a cat would sit in the night sky, but the thought appealed to me. For this I'm painting the base black with some blue galaxy dye nebula-like gradients. I'm just using ordinary acrylic paints for this. For the stars, I tried to blend some lighter, bigger dots to make some stars appear to be shining. I'm starting out with blue and then switch to white. After this I paint the little starry sprinkles. This could also be done with a toothbrush, but my desk is rather small and this would have resulted in a very sprinkly table and everything around it. Now it's time to paint the cat. As you can see, I sanded it a bit to make it somewhat smoother. Unfortunately, later I discovered some parts I didn't sand thoroughly enough, but I guess it's not too bad. To paint my sculpts, I like to use liquid acrylic, so I'm priming my cat with white opaque airbrush color. Now you might ask why I didn't airbrush that. That's just because I'm a lazy ass and I hate cleaning the airbrush, and my compressor is so loud that the neighbors would probably get a heart attack. So I just paint white paint on the cat with a brush. Lots of coats of white paint. After the white paint, I'm adding the orange spots around the ear, the back and the tail. To complete the body paint, now follows the gray parts. The inside of the ears get a soft pink color, and so is the nose. The eyes are a challenge for me. Every time I paint on small details with a brush, I need to hold my breath doing it. Obviously, even worse are the lashes. The cat has some rosy cheeks. For that I'm using pink pastel chalk that I put on it with a makeup brush. This needs to be sealed with a clear sealant later or it will rub off. I'm using the same method to add some shading around the eyes as they don't look clearly outlined in the reference. The good thing about pastels is, if some of the chalk is where it doesn't belong, you can simply erase it. It works best with the net eraser. Net eraser? Net eraser? Not entirely sure. Once the cat is finished, I just basically do the same with the pumpkins. I added multiple layers of paint until they have a nice even color. At last it's time to position the cat on the base, so I looked at how I liked it best on my starry sky. And finally, the fat cat is done. Thanks for watching, and I'm gonna see you next time.